While we wait for a couple other folks who will probably be joining us in a few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, Lori, if you don't mind if I read your bio to our participants. So we at NEDIC are so excited to have Lori here today. Lori is a registered dietitian with over 10 years of clinical experience in eating disorders and type 1 diabetes. After starting her career in child and adolescent eating disorder programs, Lori moved to Durham region and worked at the Charles H. Best Diabetes Center, combining her knowledge of eating disorder treatment with that of managing type 1 diabetes to support those that struggled with chaotic eating behaviors or insulin omission. Lori currently teaches at Humber College and Guelph Humber University in kinesiology, nutrition, fitness, and wellness coaching programs, where she delivers her materials from a health at every size approach. We also love health at every size, so that's very exciting for us. Can I share your blogging information? Oh, I'm not sure if I can hear you again, Lori. Can you?
Sorry, I set up my microphone because I thought the echo was coming from my speakers. So yes, share away.
Sorry. Okay, it could be. I'm going to mute my mic once you start presenting, so that might affect the echo in some way. I see someone else saying we're getting an echo. Does this change anything? Is there still an echo? Not sure. I think the echo's gone. Okay, that might have been an audio setting on my end. So lastly, I'll share that Lori has a blog at unapologeticallymerd.com. And you'll be coming up in a podcast called Nourished Cycle. Lori also sees clients virtually or in her office in Port Perry, Ontario. So thank you again, Lori, for joining us. I am going to pass the floor over to you because I know you have a great presentation set up for us. If anyone has any tech questions or concerns, you're welcome to enter them in the chat box below, and I'll address them as we go. And there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so if you have questions, I would encourage you to save them for the end, and then Lori will give a few minutes to the questions. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and I'm going to pass it off to Lori.
Hi, I think I have my microphone on. The little green thing is now pulsing at me, so I think that's cool. Thank you so much for taking your lunch hour today, for those of you that are in the same time zone as I am, for talking about diabulimia. So hopefully this answers some questions that you have about this topic. And if it doesn't, please feel free to ask a question at the end. And hopefully I either know the answer or can help direct you. So, oh, I hit the wrong button, sorry. So that was a really great blurb about me, so I don't really need to do much of this. I just wanted, I guess, so that you know that I've been a dietitian since 2006, so my perspective has changed since 2006, as I'm sure many people have. I did volunteer at NEDIC in my undergrad, so it's super exciting to be doing a webinar for them. I have worked in child and adolescent eating disorder programs and a specifically type 1 diabetes program. And so I was really lucky to get that much time with individuals with type 1 diabetes, and we're going to be doing some more talking about that soon. I currently teach at Humber College and Guelph Humber University, and I see patients virtually and in my office, so if you ever wanted to connect that way, that's cool. And I blog, guest speak, and work on a podcast, so that's all that. Keep hitting the wrong button. So today what I want to do is I want to go over what type 1 diabetes is. I have taken the idea that diabetes is not most people who signed up for this webinar's first line of work. I was thinking mostly people with more of an eating disorder background. So I thought it'd be really important to go through what type 1 diabetes is, talk about what diabulimia is, some ideas of how we can reduce the risk, possible treatment ideas, and then where we can go from here, because I think we're going to see an increase as people become more aware of what diabulimia is and how it can affect individuals in the diabetes world. So that's what I want to start with today. And I have shortened this a little bit just so that we do have time at the end to ask questions. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It can attack anyone from, I think the youngest client that I have ever had, not worked with personally, but within my clinic, was 12 months. And you can be diagnosed right up until you're an adult and late into adulthood. A lot of people think it's predominantly children that get type 1 diabetes. They probably do have more of an incidence than adults, although we do see that many adults first get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and then find out later that it's type 1 diabetes. So I think that when we are looking for diabulimia or markers, we need to make sure that irregardless of stage of age in what they're diagnosed, that's a really important thing to look for. So when we have type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease, like I mentioned. So what it means is that your body attacks your pancreas, and your pancreas can no longer make insulin. So you need to get it from an outside source by injection. Currently, injection in Canada is the only way to get insulin. For people with type 1 diabetes, just to quickly talk about insulin, they should get started on 2 different types of insulin, and this is kind of important when we do talk about diabulimia. The one is what we call long-acting insulin. It's generally a flat insulin. They would take it once, sometimes 2 a day, depending on dosing by the doctor. But what that does is it takes tiny bits of sugar from their blood all day long and puts it in their cells for use. And this is really important when we talk about diabulimia, because sometimes people attempt to live off their long-acting insulin instead of using the rapid-acting insulin, which is their, it has a peak. It's a shorter-acting insulin, generally 4 hours. And what that does is they take their rapid-acting insulin when they eat. So they'll take that type of insulin 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 times a day to take the carbohydrates from their foods at those meals and bring those into their body. So what happens at diagnosis when the pancreas stops producing insulin is that the glucose from food gets stuck in the bloodstream. When it's stuck in the bloodstream, the cells are starving. So we can almost think of it as if the body is going through something very similar to when we have a restrictive eating disorder, that the cells are starving and the body is trying to do all that it can to get that energy. So the body goes into ketosis and starts to break down fat and muscle in order to get ketones for energy. Blood sugars start to get really high. We see an increase in thirst, an increase in peeing because of they drinking so much. We see fatigue, but what we also see is fairly dramatic weight loss at diagnosis. And in some clients, this can be a key to when we're starting talking about body image and stuff, because if they were living in a larger body before diagnosis, what happens is as this weight loss starts occurring while they're going into their diagnosis, they get a lot of positive feedback. So family members, friends, whomever start to comment on their weight loss. And so their body is changing in a way that is giving them this positiveness about it that they've never had, although they're going into this disease state. What happens then is they get diagnosed, we need to start giving insulin, their weight will start to recover. At this point, I have actually sat in clinics where parents have said to me, is there any way you can keep them at this size? Which is very concerning to me because then we have to really unpack what is happening in the home when we talk about fat shaming or weight stigma. Because if the parents are wanting their children's bodies to stay at this size after diagnosis, not necessarily trying to recover growth or weight or anything like that, we should definitely put these kids on our flag them on our markers of what we need to watch as they get on, because they have now been told that their sick body is the body that their family wants to see. This also, they learn very quickly that not taking insulin equals weight loss, taking insulin equals weight gain. And even though it's not the insulin itself that is making them gain weight. It is their body getting the energy into the cells and not having to go into ketosis. It can be very, very difficult. Weight gain can also feel quite rapid at that time. As I mentioned, the high blood sugars cause an increase in thirst and an increase of peeing. So they often are quite dehydrated at diagnosis. And so when they get rehydrated, their weight will go up. And so they can feel like they're gaining weight very quickly. Oftentimes, I have found that clients associate the weight gain with insulin, and not necessarily just with their body becoming hydrated or their body trying to come back to its healthy weight or growth. So we really need to be really aware what happens at diagnosis. When working with a client with diabulimia, it might be really important for you to find out what happened for them at diagnosis. Was there dramatic weight loss? Did they get a lot of positive reinforcement for this weight loss? What was said to them? What was said to them when they went through the period of time that was where their weight started to go back up? And when their weight started to go back up, how did they internalize this? So what's really important is that at some point we go back and find out what happened at diagnosis. And not only what physically happened to them at diagnosis, I think a very key thing and something that is really important is their initial education. The reason I say this is I still feel that there's a lot of weight stigma in the healthcare arena, and we live in diet culture. And so sometimes the way we talk about things and sometimes the words we use, we don't realize how people internalize them. When you're first diagnosed, you start to give injections of insulin. These injections have to go into your subcutaneous tissue, which is your fat tissue. The needles are quite short. They are to go right under the skin, and that's where you inject insulin. So oftentimes I have heard diabetes educators talk about, we need to pinch an inch. We need to put it where you have a little bit of meat. We need to find a spot where you have a little bit more fat than other spots. Especially if a body got very, very tiny and lost a lot of its fat tissue and muscle mass before diagnosis, sometimes they can talk about, oh, you're so small, you don't have a place where we can inject. We have to use this spot. And then as their bodies start to come back up and recover, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can inject here, you can inject here. What oftentimes that means to individuals is, oh, this is where I'm fat. And as we know in society, people often connotate that word with many different things. So being really aware of the words that we use when we talk about injections can also really help. So if you're going back and working with someone who has diabulimia, talking about their sites, talking about, for those of you that don't know, sites is where you give in your injection. And what it meant, how it felt. And also, like, if someone is pulling up your shirt, because abdomen is a very common area where we will inject insulin, what does that feel like? If someone's grabbing your stomach trying to find a site, what does that make you think? And then in the beginning, when we have this initial education, clients often come back quite frequently. And during this time, they start to realize, oh, do you know what? Now they can pinch here, and now they can pinch here. So being really conscientious of those words. Also, the dietitian is a huge part of the diabetes team, especially at diagnosis, where they have to teach how to count carbohydrates. And the reason for this is that rapid-acting insulin that we give at meals is matched to carbohydrates for dosing purposes. So sometimes people will take 1 unit of rapid-acting insulin for every 10 grams of carbs that they eat. So what is done is parents are asked to complete food records, or if a person is old enough to do this on their own, and start counting the carbohydrates of their food really fast. Depending on their viewpoint on carbohydrates, this can really internalize how they feel about their eating habits, how they feel about weight, how they feel about carbohydrates in general. People don't have a concept of how many carbohydrates are needed in a day. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, I've eaten 22 carbohydrates. I need to stop. And so we really start putting this focus on food that they never had. Also, people can be very meticulous. Parents, in my experience, get very, very nervous about lows. So that's a low blood sugar. A low blood sugar can cause death. And so they're very on top of everything that goes into their child's body, very on top of every amount of carbohydrates. They will follow them around with food, being like, take 2 more bites, take 2 more bites, drink this, you need this, to keep the carbohydrates up to match the insulin. And so sometimes people start to really overthink the carbohydrates, and then it really starts to get pushed. Oftentimes we have to have a child eat a certain amount of carbohydrates at meals, and so their food is labeled as 30 grams of carb. So they no longer eat an apple, they eat 32 grams of carb. And this is what's taught right at diagnosis. And this, depending on how opinions are in food, depending what people think of carbohydrates, depending on all that kind of things, that can really inform how they view food after diagnosis and going through their life with type 1 diabetes. When we carbohydrate count, it's to match the food to the insulin. And I'm not sure how often this is used outside of Ontario, but there used to be a long-acting insulin that you would give it in the morning so kids didn't have to worry about injections at school during the day, but they would have to eat a certain number of carbs at meals. And so it was like, no, it doesn't really matter what you eat. We don't let them choose their foods that they want. You have to eat this many carbs. So please eat these 2 slices of bread and whatever else, but you need to eat those 2 slices of bread. So again, we're really starting to create the dialogue around food that comes with diabetes that is not necessarily intuitive. We don't let them, they can't really eat when they want. They can't really choose what they want. They can't decide, do you know what, I really want to eat just the turkey out of my sandwich today because that's what I feel like. It's like, no, you have to eat the bread. So because you've taken insulin. So again, this relationship between food and insulin can really be magnified and again can spill over to later. We also do a lot of weighing in clinics. And I know various clinics are use different protocols and stuff. Generally, what I find is, especially in the beginning, people will weigh their clients every few days because this is a way of assessing whether hydration is coming up. And then every week for the first month or 2. And then gold standard is every 3 months when they're in clinic. So if you think a person is diagnosed at the age of 7 with type 1 diabetes and they stay in care for their diabetes for the long haul, and let's say they live to 70, and I'm sorry, but I can't do this math in my head, but if they get weighed every 3 months for that 63 years and they stand on a scale and know the number, imagine what that feels like. And so we do this a lot. And I have had parents stand with clipboards and write down their kids' weight. And I'm always like, what are you doing? But it's a tracking thing. And diabetes is so much about data, getting the data of the blood sugars, getting the data of the carbohydrates, getting the data of their weight and growth, that people get really, really caught up and kind of take, they do take it out of context. They don't know enough about growth. We don't know enough about growth. And so these frequent weighings can really start to make people feel not so awesome about themselves. I used to ask kids when they would get on the scale, what do you think this does? And like so many times they would say to me, oh, it measures my fat. And I would say, no, it kind of measures your relation to gravity, and in that your bones and your fingernails and the food that you ate that's sitting in your stomach and your eyeballs and your pee and your blood. And it was kind of like mind-blowing for so many of them because they associate scales with measuring a fat, and then they have to get their fat, then I did that air quote, sorry, measured every 3 months. And when we do this, we really start to put so much focus on body and so much focus on food. way more focus than the general population. And when you think about it, we swim in this stew of diet culture all the time, where our food is looked at one way, our habits are looked at another way, our body size and weight is like viewed, and then we kind of put this into this medical model. And it can really affect how people feel about themselves. And then, like I mentioned, we have this continued monitoring. You don't get diabetes and walk out into the world and live your life. You are in good programs, in good areas of the universe. You're continually monitored. So frequent weighing every 3 months, injection site checking. So you will be in a clinic and the doctor will say, let me see your sites. So you have to pull up your shirt and show your abdomen to whomever's in the room. And then people will say things like, oh, you're getting lumpy here, because insulin can cause cell growth. And if you do inject into the same spot, yeah, I have seen people who had like golf ball size lumps on their abdomen. I don't necessarily think that we should be saying that to others, because I think it scares people to actually put the insulin in. And you say it to an 8-year-old, oh, do you know what? If you keep putting in the site, you're going to get big bumps the size of golf balls. I think when they have a black and white mentality at that age, what that means is they're just going to go, oh, then I'm not going to put insulin in because that will make me not get it. Instead of, really just focusing on the rotation of sites, moving it around. But then when we start to look for, oh, we're just looking for lumps and bumps and fatty tissue in your stomach, that can make people feel really horrible about themselves because, again, we live in this culture where we're not supposed to have that. And it can really affect how they start dosing their insulin. We also have continuing review of food records, assessing carb counting ability. Not only do they do that in Ontario, at least at diagnosis, you have to prove that you can carb count before you go on what's called an insulin pump. An insulin pump is a pump that only runs off long-acting insulin. It drips little bits of insulin in all during the day, and then you tell it how many carbs you're eating every time you eat to give it yourself a larger dose. And so you have to prove that you are counting carbs properly again. And then when we are working as professionals with individuals with type 1, our own, just like every other thing in life, our own personal bias and stuff can start to come up. And we really need to be aware of that, because if we do have any weight stigma, fat phobia, anything going on for us or in the team, that can, if it's different within the team, it can cause very mixed messages. It can make people feel very insecure. And so we really need to continue to stay focused on long-term care in the words that we use, even not just at diagnosis. So how is there a type 1 and eating disorder link? I got these stats from the JDRF website. Nearly 1 in 5 children with type 1 diabetes will have diabulimia or an eating disorder, and 1 in 4 females will show signs of disturbed eating behavior. I'm going to be completely honest. Working with teenagers for almost my whole entire career, I would say a lot of them have disturbed eating behaviors, just because of the world we live in and the way school systems are set up. There's not always seats in cafeterias, and you can't sit in halls and that kind of stuff. So I would say that I think this is a good estimate. I would question whether it's actually higher, to be honest with you. And it's estimated that 6 to 7% of people with type 1 diabetes will have diabulimia. That is higher than the average population with an eating disorder. And if you work in diabetes, I can pretty much guarantee that you probably have at least 1 client with diabulimia, which is really quite high. And again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but I think it's really unfortunate. We do not have much of an overlap between individuals who work with type 1 and individuals who work with eating disorders in the ability to be able to work with all these clients. So now that we've done a little bit on diabetes, you're probably sitting there, can we just get to the diabulimia part? So what is it? It's technically not a diagnostic term. You're not going to find it in the DSM. It's more of a popular coined term. And what it is it means that you're emitting calories by purging by not using insulin. So when I talked before about how insulin, what it does is it's like glucose's best friend. They hold hands and insulin takes the glucose into the cells. So what a lot of people learn in diagnosis is if I don't take that insulin, the glucose stays in my cells and I will lose weight. It's kind of like a basic breakdown of it. And so they either don't give a full dose. So let's say they do their math and it says they're supposed to take 10 units of rapid acting insulin, they'll take 5. So someone will see them give an injection and they'll eat their food and they know in their head that not all of it's going to go in. So it's a version of purging. Other people, like I mentioned before, with the long-acting insulin, they might up their long-acting insulin enough to keep them out of the hospital from that diabetic ketoacidosis that they might have had a diagnosis. But they'll continue to lose weight because what they're doing is they're not giving themselves enough insulin to take care of the food. And there are actually no definitive markers for diagnosis with diabulimia, and this is because we don't have an actual diagnosis of it. So there's a lot of different things we can talk about, a lot of different things we can look at, but it's really hard to pinpoint and say, bang, yes, you have that. Because again, someone might reduce their insulin at meals, not because of diabulimia, but because insulin's so expensive and they don't have a drug plan. Or they might just not be good counters. We might not have given them the right carb ratio. They might find that, you know what, there is no way, and this is something that's quite common in high schools, I'm not giving my insulin at school, I'm not letting my friends see it, so they're not going to give their lunch insulin. It's not necessarily meaning they have diabulimia, so there's a lot of other reasons they wouldn't give their insulin for their food, but if any of those things occur, you should probably check in and see if they have any of the other kind of flags for it. And again, this makes this diagnosis really difficult. Things we can look for when we're looking for diabetes. The hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month marker that can show us on average what a person's blood sugars have been like within that 3-month period. So simply put, your red blood cells swim through your body and they pick up little bits of sugar. And then we do a blood test, we take those blood cells, and then we analyze them to see how much sugar has been stuck on them. In Canada, we give this number as a percentage, so it doesn't correlate with blood sugar finger poking numbers. So if your blood sugar is over 9%, and I haven't done the conversion in a long time, and I probably should have done it before I did this, it probably means your blood sugars are running maybe 13, 14, don't quote me, I'm sorry, on average on that, when normal blood sugars are 4 to 7. And so when we start to see A1Cs, hemoglobin A1Cs going up over 9%, I think we really need to start checking in to see what's happening. Is there any body image issues? Is there anything going on for them right now? Has there been any type of trauma in their history? How are they coping with life? Just the usual things that we want to start checking in with, because when we start to see those blood sugars climb for a 3-month period, then we get a 6-month period, and it's gone up again. We really need to start checking in before this gets out of control and harder to work with. If we start to see weight loss in a client or individual, when everyone is reporting that they are eating normal or above average normal amounts of food. Again, we know growth and development, appetite should change and fluctuate, and bodies change and fluctuate over time. But if we start to see a dramatic weight loss, and again, if you're a clinic that's choosing not to weigh every 3 months, congratulations. I think that's wonderful. But you might start to see a visual thing. Parents might comment on pants or clothes being too big. If you do see your clients enough, you do start to visualize these changes. And so if they're reporting, oh no, all of a sudden so-and-so is eating 3 big bowls of pasta every night, but they're losing weight. And sometimes I find you actually get these comments from the parents who are like, I can't believe how she does this. I wish I could eat like this. You definitely need to talk to the parents if this is happening about how they talk about their bodies and food. But B, I also think that should be a flag of, okay, so you have an increased appetite, which might signal to me that your cells are starving because they're not getting what they want. So are we giving insulin for that 3 bowls of pasta? And if so, how much? And then sometimes it'll be that, oh, I was thinking I might be working out later and then I didn't. And some people will reduce insulin for exercise reasons so that they can prevent a low. And then if we start having these conversations a lot, we definitely need to check in and see what's happening. But a weight loss with no change in intake or an increase in intake should definitely be a flag. If there's partners or family reporting that the injections are starting to become more secretive. Now, if anybody in the audience has worked with teenagers, you know that things just get secretive. Like where they're starting to be more independent. They don't want to sit at the dinner table and give their insulin. But if we're starting to find, they're going into the bathroom. So cool, you totally want to give your kid space, but just also know that it's really easy to take an insulin pen and shoot the insulin into the sink. So you're not seeing any change in frequency of purchasing insulin. It's just not going into their body. The other thing that can happen is I actually had a client once who was shooting it into a pillow behind them. They'd say, oh, I'm going to give it on the couch and shoot it into the pillow. And it was only discovered because insulin has a very, very distinct smell. People who are on an insulin pump, they have what's called an insulin site. And so they can push the buttons and make it look like they're going in and not push send. They can pull there's a cannula that goes under the skin in an insulin pump. They can pull it out just a bit so that they'll give it, but it will leak out instead of going into their skin. There's so many ways they can be very secretive about insulin, but if you start to notice that they're not doing it in front of anybody, they're refusing to give it in public, again, you don't have to automatically assume that diabulimia is happening, but you should start to question as the reasons why and what's happening. If all of a sudden you're finding as a practitioner, especially if anyone here is a doctor, you're actually needing to they're not filling their refills as quickly. And especially if we're working with kids during growth, they should be going through a lot of insulin. If we start to see that happen, then that should be a flag. If family members start reporting that their child or teen or whomever they live with starts to smell like ketones. Ketones are the byproduct of when the body breaks down fat and protein for energy, and some people can smell it on a person's breath. So to me, it smells like if you take pineapple juice and mix it with nail polish remover, which is a very weird combo, I know, but that's what it smells like. It's like a sweet ketone, acetone smell. And if you have the ability to smell that, you might think, oh, if there's ketones being made, that means that there's high blood sugars and there's sugar stuck in the blood. It's something that some people actually can't smell ketones. That's why I say if you can smell them. But if you know someone, like if you're working with someone who has diabulimia and you can smell the ketones, then you know that they're running high blood sugars right now. Another thing is people can catch the increased thirst, increased urination, again, just like before diagnosis. We also see that some people get the long-term complications of diabetes, like hemorrhages in their eyes, retina issues, kidney issues, get them a lot younger. You can see problems like this in people in their early 20s. And so again, we need to go, if there's something going wrong here, we need to figure out what's going on with their diabetes, with their body image, with their eating habits. I think it all goes together at that point. Things when we're looking at things we need to remember is that people can start to get really used to running high blood sugars. So what that means is, so in my universe right now, it is very hot today and super muggy, but it's not a typical fall day. 2 days ago, it was really cold and for me, and I pulled on a sweater, and it probably, if we had this day happen in spring, I'd be like, woo woo, summer is coming, right? So your body gets used to a temperature, and then the temperature changes, and something that feels really warm in spring is really cold in fall. It's the same with blood sugars. You get really used to running high blood sugars, people are going to say to you, don't you feel terrible with high blood sugars? And The clients are going to say, no, I feel really, really good. I feel normal, because their body is kind of getting adapted to running at these high blood sugars. If the blood sugars drop too quickly into normal, they are going to feel terrible. They're going to feel low. They're going to feel nauseous and sweaty and shaky and all these other things, which then means they're going to not want to do this. So when a person is first diagnosed with diabetes, we will drop the blood sugars very, very slowly. When a person is running high for weight loss and in diabulimia, it's the same thing. The blood sugars need to come down very, very slowly, a lot slower than I find most medical professionals or family members want. But you need them to feel good doing it, or they're not going to do it. It's like anything that anyone here has done in their life where you feel terrible, you're going to be like, no, I'm not doing that again. So it's the same thing. You want to bring those blood sugars down really, really slow. And just like anybody who does motivational interviewing knows, you're going to give so much positive reinforcement for every time we get it down a tiny bit. You're going to make them feel really good about it, because again, it's that process of going through this process. Sometimes people won't check blood sugars. They don't want to know that they're high. They don't want to know where their blood sugars are. And they feel that if they don't have the data, then they don't have to do what's called a blood correction. So when you go to eat, you will give yourself a dose of insulin and to cover the food. But if your blood sugar is high, you can add extra rapid-acting insulin to bring your blood sugars down to normal. So some people will give for the food, but not correct the high blood sugars, which means they're taking care of the food, so they're going to not, or they'll probably round it down a bit, but so they're taking care of that, but they're not going to correct their blood sugars because they don't want to bring them back down to normal. This could be a good stepping stone for someone who's not doing that, but for someone who's kind of starting there in their diabulimia, it's a good thing to kind of be aware of. The other thing is the sneaky blood sugar checking. So random thing I learned is that if you use 2% milk and take a blood glucose monitor and dip the strip in, you can get a beautiful perfect blood sugar. If you use cream, you can get it slightly lower. If you want to show a high blood sugar, dip it in a glass of juice. And so because it reads sugar, that's all it does. If you put it in water, you get nothing. But milk will give a beautiful blood sugar. And this is what people do. If clients have like little milker container things in their purse or whatever, probably using it to check their blood sugars. So you might see an A1C, a hemoglobin A1C that's high, and oftentimes when people hand in handwritten blood sugars that don't match the A1C, people will say, oh, let me see your meter, right? Because you want to check. And then they grab this meter and it's like almost bang on blood sugars the whole time. They're probably using milk for their blood sugars. We should also be really cognizant of the time of year. People working with individuals who are stepping into diabulimia, who have diabulimia as well, you need to know what's going on in that client's life. Rum season here runs from about May to June. I would see a dramatic increase in hemoglobin A1Cs and blood sugars starting in February. Dress shopping, oftentimes I found where I worked, started in March break, and people were trying to lose a lot of weight before prom. And so we see that. We see A1Cs go high going into summer because they're going into bathing suit season. The summer before starting college or university, hemoglobin A1Cs, again, going up because we have this preconceived idea that our life will be better, things will be easier if we have a certain body size. So always being aware of kind of the cycle of life your clients are going into. I have worked with a couple people with diabulimia who it was, they were getting married. And so this was how they lost their weight before the wedding, because this is a thing. And again, you have to realize that people are being marketed a lot to lose weight. And this is a very easy way for people with type 1 to lose weight, is they just stop giving their insulin. So how do we treat people with diabulimia? This is something that I think can be very difficult for people who work in diabetes to accept, but we need to not go for perfect diabetes. We need to not get all those injections in all day, every day. What I think we need to do is we need to try and get to good diabetes. And I think that is a process. And I think that is get on a roller coaster and ride it 3 times. And then that is the step to good diabetes, because it's going to be difficult, because you're going to have to start initiating behaviors to giving the insulin that weren't there. You're going to have to figure out a way to how are we going to dose this insulin if people are starting to become very obsessed with food and the carbs. How do we carb count and give insulin? So this might be very controversial, but I don't necessarily think we need to carb count and give insulin. I think we need to go, do you know what? My sandwich is 3 units. Because you as the practitioner can figure that out, and you say, okay, you're going to give your insulin for your peanut butter sandwich that you eat for breakfast every single day, and you're going to take 3 units. We are going to take the responsibility of the carb counter to start to initiate that behavior of giving the insulin, to start to normalize that, and we go through this process before we get back to that behavior of carb counting. Carb counting can be very, very triggering for people going through this process. But again, you want to go on an insulin pump, someone has to click off that you can carb count in Ontario to get it funded. So this can be very, very difficult for people. We need to be, as practitioners, really compassionate and empathetic. And, you know, I know in the back of our minds, especially diabetes educators, we're thinking about the long-term consequences. We're thinking of the long-term issues that can occur if insulin is not given now or properly. But we also need to think about if we want them to get to 80, 90, 100 years old with diabetes, they're going to have to get through this, and they're going to have to get through the triggering behavior, because it's not changing anytime soon, to my understanding. I know there's a lot of great things on the horizon with regards to diabetes, but this is still a main component, because this is the role of insulin. The role of insulin is to take that carbohydrate that is broken to glucose and put it in the body. We need to talk about, again, like I said, bringing the blood sugars down slowly. You are not going to be like, okay, this is your regimen and this is what we're going to do, because it's going to make them feel terrible. Normalizing eating patterns. Sometimes you even have to start with the normalizing of eating before we even tackle the insulin component. You might start with, let's say you're working with a client who wants to have a small snack in the morning. They think this is a goal, they think this is something they want to try. They don't want to have breakfast, but they want to have this small snack. So you might not pair insulin and snack together. You might start with the snack, and then you might start with part of the dose of insulin for the snack. And then you might add the full dose. Like, this is a process. When working with individuals with diabulimia, there's a lot of extra steps added as opposed to just kind of the protocols that you might follow. You definitely, in my opinion, need to work on the body image. When you have a chronic disease, I think that it is so normal to dislike what's going on with your body. A lot of people I've worked with diabetes, whether they have diabulimia or not, hate diabetes. They hate what it has done. They hate that their body has attacked themselves. And I realize hate's a very strong word, but this is what they say. And so we need to figure out what is going on for them in their body. Do they remember having their stomach pinched to show how to give an injection and what that felt like? Their body story will tell you so much about what's going on with their diabulimia. Do they remember what it felt like before diagnosis? Do they remember what it felt like after diagnosis? Do they remember the change? I once had a client who, they were diagnosed in October, and I saw them for a follow-up in November, and I remember the dad saying, she went from a skeleton to a pumpkin in less than a month. And I was the only person in that room that was appalled. The daughter and the mom sat there like this was normal conversation about bodies and food. And I was just like, whoa, we cannot talk like this. Like, what does this mean? And we needed to unpack this. And so she viewed herself as going from a skeleton to a pumpkin because that was she was told. And what does this going to mean 10, 15 years down the line when she was like, diabetes made me into a pumpkin? And so how their whole diagnosis evolved, how they felt about their body, how they wanted to change their bodies, how they felt about food. Like, oh my goodness, you don't get to eat pasta without there being a major overthinking of the pasta. And what kind of sauce is going to put on it? Because if we put it like a fatty sauce, like let's say an Alfredo sauce, as yummy and delicious as it is, it's going to slow the release of the carbohydrate into the bloodstream, and therefore an insulin dose might have made them go low, and then they went high later. And so there's all these things that we need to talk about when we start talking about the diabulimia. What rules did they create around food? I think the food rules that get created in diabetes are long-lasting and hard to get rid of. I've seen many adult clients in their 40s and 50s who were diagnosed with diabetes in the 80s. And in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was like, no sugar. You're not allowed sugar. You have diabetes. You don't eat sugar. And I was sitting across from people who had never had cake. Now, they might not have diabulimia in the context of omitting insulin for weight loss, but they definitely had some crazy food rules because of the way they were taught at diagnosis that then caused very chaotic eating and abnormal eating behaviors and abnormal relationships with food. Like there was, I will never forget one person, total tangent, I'm sorry, but said they wanted to try cheesecake for their whole life. So I assisted in giving them permission to try the cheesecake. And then they came back, they're like, I don't like cheesecake. I didn't miss much, but I'm really glad I ate it. So when you think about it, these are the rules that we start to ingrain in people with diabetes. That topped with when you have a low blood sugar, so that's a blood sugar below 4, you need a rapid acting sugar to bring your blood sugars up. So things like pop, juice, syrup, glucose tablets, those rocket candies you get at Halloween, those things are used to bring blood sugar up. People start to associate those foods with foods that jack my blood sugar. So we can create a rule around that about whether we should eat them. But they also sometimes are foods that are withheld and you only get when you go low. So again, it's that deprivation of a food that can lead to a food rule that might cause you to just, bottom your blood sugar so you can take it. So when we're working with individuals with diabulimia, you need to get their food rules and unpack them and spend a lot of time unpacking them because the whole dynamic is going to greatly affect their treatment as well as moving forward and really affects how they're eating. One thing I think is severely lacking is that I think when working with people with diabulimia, there needs to be a multidisciplinary team, which I think there always is, but I think they need to know both disease states. I think you need to have a team that is fluent in eating disorders and fluent in diabetes because many times I have seen people who've worked with teams with one or the other where they didn't know much about the other one. And it was always like, oh, you should probably ask your diabetes team. Or, oh, you should probably deal with the eating disorder. And then we get this really bumpy care. We get really disconnected care. And we get this almost mixed messaging. And in eating disorders, we talk about splitting, right? Like we talk about be careful that the team's not getting split. Well, imagine having twice as many people on this team where one's focusing on one thing and one's focusing on the other, how easy it is to get split. And so I think it's really, really important that we either start training people in both. You can always hire me. No, I'm joking. Or we really start to do this. We really need to start putting the two together. We need to start having more talks. We need to start having more people involved because I think it's going to be very, very difficult to move through treatment and get to recovery. And I know there's a lot of different terms of recovery and whether you come out of recovery, but I think we need to get there. We need to have people that really, really understand both. And I think it really needs to be family-based. When I say family-based, eating disorders don't just live within the individual that have them. They live within all the individuals in the home which they live in, and extended family and friends that are helping. Diabetes is the same. Diabetes is not just the person who has it. It's especially with kids, it's the parent that is counting carbs. It's the parent that's getting up at 3 a.m. checking blood sugars. It's the sibling that has to make sure that the blood sugars are good before they can go to the park. So they're both very, very heavy in family involvement. And so we find that family involvement in both have good treatment outcomes. So when we're working with this, I think we definitely need to bring everyone to the table and talk about it. Again, it's that, what are the conversations happening at home around food? What are the conversations happening at home around bodies? I really like to take parents aside and say, what are you talking about in your house? How do you talk about your own body? How do you talk about other people's bodies? Is really going to affect how your child is feeling about their body right now and going forward. So I think that we definitely, and again, I think people need to understand the concept of both disease states when working in this family-based care. Finally, I want to touch on how do we reduce the risk. And I think this has probably been like a theme going throughout. But I think we really, really need to watch our language. And that's not to say we're going to be perfect. Oh, there's been so many times in my career, if I could just dial back and be like, oh, I just want to change that one word. I'm so sorry I said that. But we are always learning and growing, right? We are always evolving and changing. And hopefully, the more we know, the better we do, right? And so we can't go back, but I think we can learn from it. We can learn from, saying how we talk about giving injections, how we talk about finding sites, how we talk about carbohydrates. We can call out people or call them in the room and say, why are you talking about this? Why are you saying that, I think my kid's getting a little chubby? Like, what does that mean for you? And what does that mean for them? I think we need to start doing more of that. I think we really need to start working on the words and the language in all of diabetes care. I think it needs to start right from the beginning. I think we need to acknowledge the body changing. I realize that very few people will agree with me on this, but I feel that we need to start pulling away from a very weight-centric, body-focused, food-focused way in a disease that's all it has. And so we need to start really working on how do we talk about food in a way that is not just you need to make sure you count this many carbohydrates and give this amount of insulin so you don't go low and that you keep your blood sugars in good. How can we talk about how does this food make you feel? How does this food nourish you? And somehow start combining that with the diabetes. That is a very, very big thing that I think can really help to reduce the risk of people with type 1 diabetes getting eating disorders. We need to be on top of the warning signs of chaotic eating. When we have kids and teenagers and beyond, because let's be honest, we never get out of this diet culture. We are steeped in it all the time. When we start to see the behaviors of, I'm not eating lunch. There's nowhere at school. How am I supposed to eat lunch at school? Start to really unpack that. Start to notice if the carbs are actually going away. This is a common thing as well. Stop eating the carbs so I don't have to give the insulin because I don't want to give the insulin, right? What is happening here? Where is this? When family members go on diets, I'm sorry, but if a parent is going on let's call it a keto diet, and then we start to focus on, well, what's the kid doing with carbohydrate? They're very easily going to get on that path. And again, when the brain is starving, like it is when it's not getting the glucose that it needs from food, you're going to have those same thought patterns that you have when the brain is starving from severe anorexia. Body checking and attempts at weight loss, really, really important to pay attention to. Start to notice if they're moving their sites, where they're putting their sites. Start to, get parents to tell you, start to notice what's going on. Really, really pay attention to how they carry their bodies, what they do with their bodies, how they clothe their bodies, that kind of stuff. And if you start to notice any talking about injection sites differently, like the pinching the inch, the grabbing the fat, anything like that that's coming in, really, really work on what's going on with that. I just totally checked the time. Oh, I went too far. I'm sorry. There. I've said this, and I will say this probably for the rest of my eternity. Fat stigma, weight bias, and family is huge. It is, again, this culture. You need to be aware of it. You need to know what's going on in the home. We need to know how people are talking about bodies. And I think we should start calling out our team members on their weight bias. You know, okay, not calling out, how about calling in team members on weight bias to start figuring out how is that projecting on the people that we're working with. Like I say, people with eating disorder who work in eating disorder treatments should not be working in quote unquote weight management, because there's a big disconnect. I think we need to have positive body or at least body neutrality in our diabetes practices, and be aware of what's going on in that area. And I think we really, really need to start advocating for diabetes centers to be more aware of fat stigma and to really to work to create these safer places. In type 1, I've heard so many times, oh yeah, they're tiny, they're small, they're thin. That's how I know they have type 1. Do you know what? You can be anybody size and have type 1, just like you can be anybody size and have type 2. So we really need to work on breaking that stigma, and we really need to start talking about those things in our areas, because it's only going to make the education better for the clients in front of us to help really reduce this idea of the increased risk of eating disorders in this disease. So where can we go from here? I don't know. I think we need to really start bringing awareness of risk of diabulimia to the clinics. I think we need to start with physicians. And I really think we need to start talking about it. It needs to be at the conferences. It needs to be at the eating disorder conferences, and it needs to be at the diabetes conferences. It needs to be in our continuing education. We need to start talking about it and not stigmatizing it and making it something that is part of our screening. Just as easily as we'll screen for celiac disease in a person for type 1, we need to start screening for eating disorders, potential eating disorders, and chaotic eating. You should never assume that high blood sugars are just a teenager acting out. Yes, that is one way. You know, like when a 2-year-old will clamp their mouth shut and say, no, 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 I'm not eating peas. A 14-year-old will say, no, 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 I'm not injecting insulin. So there's definitely a huge component of not giving your insulin as being an acting out thing. Don't assume that that's what it is, ever. You need to dig. Every single person, irregardless of gender, age, body size, you need to dig as to why they're emitting their insulin. And yeah, it could just be to tick off their parents. They could just not want to give their injections, or they could have some very interesting views on their body and how it's changing. We need to talk about bodies. We need to be not scared of talking about bodies. We need to bring the body in the room. We need to do work ourselves on bodies. We need to figure out how we view bodies and what it says about how we're doing our treatment. But we need to know how their body feels when they are alone, how their body feels around other people, how their body feels when they put it in context of having diabetes. Diabetes, puberty, and female gender tend to be very, very difficult times. There's so much change and growth in that. We have a hard time keeping up with insulin due to the hormones. So what does that feel like? What does it feel to be a person living with diabetes at school, at work? How is that affecting how they feel? How is that affecting their bodies? We really need to start having these conversations and really bringing the body into the room all the time. And don't stop. Don't bring the body in the room one time and think, okay, I've done my job. If we really, really want to start sussing out diabulimia and really making it something that we are catching a lot earlier than we are, as well as maybe avoiding altogether, there needs to be talk about bodies. And we as professionals need to do the work on that. So I am very conscious of the time. And so I think if anywhere we have any idea of how to bring funding to this area, I'm sure someone out there might have a brilliant idea. I don't, but I think we do, and we should always work on bringing our teams together. And then I think I got to the end, kind of. I talk a lot. So yeah, just lots of body and focus, and really bring it up for there. And if there's any questions,
I wanted to say, Lori, as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to take a few more minutes if you want to go through your last slide. I know we said 1 o'clock, but that's kind of a rough.
Oh, I want to give everyone a chance to go to the bathroom and get a coffee before they go back to work.
That's so considerate of you. Okay, looks like we have a few questions for you. But first, thank you so much. I think that information has been so helpful, so insightful and informative. We have a question from one of our participants that says, I love the idea of assessing family weight bias and addressing it head on. Do you know of a questionnaire that could give a quick or dirty way to assess? So kind of a quick assessment tool.
Like as far as standardized tool, not off the top of my head. I kind of pepper questions in, but I can definitely try and find one and send it through with this if that's cool.
In response to that, I actually have a tool that I'm aware of. One of the dietitians on our team brought it to my attention, called Assessing Your Size Attitudes. I don't know if I can aim this right. Assessing Your Size Attitudes. It's from a textbook, I believe, called Beyond a Shadow of a Diet. So it's a scale.
I haven't got that far yet.
So there's scales, and it's naming certain attitudes about food and weight and eating. So that one is something that we sometimes use in our professional development sessions, just to get practitioners thinking about their own implicit weight bias that they may have. So that could be something worth looking into.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
We have a few other comments praising your webinar. Again, thank you so much. We have another comment saying, our nurses talk about doing a skin lift if they are very thin at diagnosis. Different wording rather than the pinch and inch.
I love that. We definitely need to work on the wording. I love the nurses I've worked with, but I always want to cry when they're like, let's find some chub back here. And I'm like, oh God, no.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing.
I like that. Thank you.
I see someone else typing at the moment, so it looks like we may have another question or comment coming up.
I did throw my email on the last slide if anyone wants to email me. I'm cool with that.
That's very, very generous of you. Thank you. We have a recording, so we'll be posting that to our website. I posted a link in the chat for folks, and registrants will get an email reminder. Okay, so a lot of praise for your webinar. Thank you, Lori. If no one else has...
Just a comment about regarding less carb counting and calling out. I'm not going to lie, it was very difficult to get to that point. And I think I tried to stay under the radar for as long as I possibly could because the pushback was quite hard. So I think anybody who's willing to try that and push back, I think it's worked very well, but I give you so much gratitude for pushing against the norms.
Thank you. I think your guidance and your transparency are really valuable. Thank you so much. See one more person typing. We may have another question coming up.
It's so funny. It's like iMessage where you see them typing and you're like, okay.
Yeah, it's true. So much pressure. It says that.
I agree. I think we do need to get away from the stereotypical idea of what an RD does, and we can definitely make a huge impact in both eating disorders and diabetes. So yeah, I like that comment. It says one clear way we are able to claim our profession. I don't know if people can read the comments, so.
Folks should be able to do them, but thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning into our webinar today. Thank you so much again, Lori, for lending your time to this. I think this has been so helpful. Thank you for all the comments and questions, everyone. And if there's no other questions, then I think we will finish up.
Have a lovely day and a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Lori. Bye-bye.
Bye.